Opening shot. Sweeping drone footage over Wittman Regional Airport. Thousands of aircraft parked wingtip to wingtip. The roar of piston engines and the distant thunder of a warbird flyby. Cut to the Flying Bulls P-38 Lightning taxiing onto Boeing Plaza under the Sunday afternoon sun. On paper, this aircraft should never have worked the way it did. In the summer of 1942, Lockheed test pilots were pushing the brand-new P-38 Lightning into high-speed dives, only for the plane to suddenly tuck its nose down violently, buffet like it was coming apart, and refuse to pull out. Pilots died. The U.S. Army Air Forces nearly wrote off one of its most promising long-range fighters. Why? Because the laws of physics had a surprise waiting at Mach 0.68 that no one in 1937 fully understood. Archival black-and-white footage of a P-38 in a steep dive, overlaid with slow-motion animation of airflow turning chaotic, cut to modern CFD simulation, showing shock waves forming on the wing. Welcome back to AirVenture Oshkosh 2025. It's Sunday, July 20th, the first full day of the world's largest aviation gathering, and one of the rarest sights in American skies just touched down. The Flying Bulls' meticulously restored P-38 Lightning, making its only public U.S. appearance this year alongside their Douglas DC-6B. Today, we're dissecting exactly why this twin-boom icon was such an engineering tightrope walk, and why its solutions still echo in every modern fighter jet you see screaming overhead. By 1937, the Army needed a fighter that could escort bombers across the vast Pacific or loiter at high altitude over Europe. Range, speed, firepower, and high-altitude performance, all in one airframe. Piston engines of the day simply couldn't deliver that on a conventional single-engine layout without massive trade-offs. Enter 27-year-old Clarence Kelly Johnson at Lockheed Skunk Works. His solution: two Allison V1710 engines, each producing about 1,150 horsepower, mounted in twin booms. Clean 3D exploded view of the P-38 showing central nacelle, twin booms, counter-rotating props, and nose armament. Here's the first principles problem. Lift is generated by accelerating air over the curved upper surface of a wing. At low speeds, that's fine. Bernoulli's principle gives you the pressure difference you need. But as the airplane itself approaches 70% of the speed of sound, the local airflow over the thickest part of the wing can actually exceed Mach 1. Shock waves form. The boundary layer separates. Lift on the tail suddenly collapses. The nose pitches down uncontrollably. This is compressibility, the same physics that would later define the sound barrier. The P-38 was the first production fighter fast enough to hit it in a dive. At Mach 0.68, the airflow over the wing was already locally supersonic. The resulting shock wave acted like an invisible brick wall that the conventional controls couldn't push through. Side-by-side CFD animation. Subsonic smooth streamlines versus transonic shock waves forming, pressure contours turning red, flow separating behind the shock. To put the numbers in perspective, in a 60-degree dive from 30,000 feet, a clean P-38 could reach 500 plus mph indicated in seconds. That's enough kinetic energy to turn a 17,500-pound airplane into a missile that no pilot could recover from without help. Johnson's twin-boom layout wasn't just for style. It let the gun send the nose where propeller arc would interfere. No synchronization gears needed. It also let the pilot sit forward for visibility while the engines were tucked away from the cockpit, reducing vibration and noise. Counter-rotating propellers canceled torque reaction and P-factor. That meant the airplane flew straight, even if one engine quit, a lifesaver on long overwater missions. Turbo superchargers kept power available up where the air is thin, but the compressibility fix came later. NACA engineer John Stack and Lockheed realized they couldn't redesign the entire wing mid-war. Instead, they added small, fast-acting dive recovery flaps under each wing outboard of the engines. Deploy them, and you change the pressure distribution, break up the shock pattern just enough, and give the tail back its authority. Close-up slow motion of dive flaps deploying on a restored P-38, followed by wind tunnel footage or animation showing how they alter the shock location and re-energize the boundary layer. It was a band-aid, but an elegant one. Pilots who had been writing farewell letters before dives suddenly had a fighting chance. Here's the part marketing brochures never mention. The P 38 was complex, expensive, and maintenance-heavy. 2 engines, 2 turbochargers, 2 superchargers, long drive shafts, complex hydraulics. A single combat damage that would sideline AP. 51 often rode off a lightning. Fuel burn was ferocious at high power. Range was great on paper, but only if you babe at the throttles. And in the cold European skies, the cockpit heaters were, let's just say, inadequate. Yet it became one of the most successful long-range fighters of the Pacific Theater precisely because the design accepted those compromises in exchange for unmatched high-altitude performance and concentrated firepower. P-38 range versus P-51 Mustang, showing the physics advantage of twin engines plus turbo at altitude. Cut to side-by-side static shots of the Flying Bull's P-38 next to a Mustang at Oshkosh. While the P-38 commands attention on Boeing Plaza, don't miss the pioneers of flight area. Replicas of the 1907 Santos Dumont Demoiselle and 1909 Blériot 11. They remind us that 120 years ago the same lift and drag equations were being solved with wood, wire, and fabric. The physics hasn't changed, only the materials have. And if you head over to the new Vertical Lift Center, you'll see modern eVTOL and rotorcraft designers wrestling with the exact opposite problem: how to generate lift at zero forward speed without melting the laws of induced power. Actuator disk theory still rules. Is the P-38 viable today? As a warbird flown by the Flying Bulls? Absolutely. As a frontline fighter? No. Its descendants, the F-22, F-35. Even the upcoming 6th-gen designs, all inherited the same hard-won lessons about transonic and supersonic flow. But they solved them with variable geometry inlets, area-ruled fuselages, and fly-by-wire that the 1940s could only dream of. Economically, operating a P-38 today costs tens of thousands per flight hour. The Flying Bulls do it for passion and education, not profit. That's the real limit of nature versus human ingenuity. We can bend the physics, but we can never escape the fuel bill. The P-38 lifting off the runway at golden hour, contrail stretching across a Wisconsin sky. Slow fade to the EAA logo and event banner. Every airplane at AirVenture, whether a 1909 replica held together by piano wire or $1 million Warbird, exists because some engineer once stared at an equation that said impossible and decided the numbers were wrong. The laws of physics don't negotiate, but they do reward the people who understand them deeply enough to work with them instead of against them. See you tomorrow at Oshkosh. Keep asking why. Subscribe for more first principles aviation breakdowns. Next, the thermodynamics of sustainable aviation fuel at AirVenture.